Good evening, everybody. So this is the roundtable which we have been looking forward to. It's mainstreaming conservation as a critical determinant in developmental projects, the role of ICOMOS India. So I'm moderating along with Professor Menon, working as the rapporteur.
Sorry, but your voice is echoing and not very clear.
Is it okay now? Am I audible?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. So just to give you a background, the profession of heritage conservation in India has been facing quite an existential crisis in the recent years. Major development projects, what we have seen in areas which are very sensitive and valuables from a rich cultural and also natural resource standpoint, seem to be progressing without due attention to these two shared resources. This is some of the projects which are very well known, like Kashi Vishwanath corridor. The corridor has decongested the temple complex. A large number of buildings have been demolished. Not only the buildings built heritage, but it has also changed the community structure. And the major purpose is to connect the Vishwanath temple. I won't talk about that, but within a record time, it has been completed and it will be inaugurated soon. We have talked a lot about the Central Vista project and in the name of the development. And we know that what is happening is that the pollution, because of the demolition, the pollution is created, the demolition of these trees and the long-term effort which is going to create, but nothing could stop that in the name of the development. Chandni Chowk redevelopment, we know it's almost like a beautification project. There are definitely a lot of good points, but there are also a lot of concern from the heritage conservation professional that how it is being implemented. Goa, I think we have been talking a lot about Goa. One of our members is very active in that it is how the natural resources is being the highway projects, the transmission line, railway lines, and in the vicinity of the World Heritage Site, new project has been coming out violating all the norms. But also what is positive is that the people of the Goa under the various forums and they have been united together and now it's gone to the court. And that's I think is a very positive point. But these are all happening in spite of all the laws, regulation and other. This is happening in the World Heritage Site. So one can also understand that what is happening to not so important and not so protected natural and the built heritage. It's not only what we can see, but also how the spirit, we have recently seen Jallianwala Bagh, that how in the name of tourism development and the promotion, how the spirit of the place is being gradually, I mean, it's questionable how it is happening in the Jallianwala Bagh Memorial. And that's happening. A lot of money is being spent. People may like it, but even the common people, the local people are protesting against that. The historians are protesting against that. So least of the such project is a very well-known project and it's happening all over because it's a top-down project. Because if it happens in the very well-known projects, one can understand that what is happening to not so important projects. So the list of projects are clearly a cause of concern and they undermine the very foundation of the profession of conservation. It appears to be a losing battle, or is it? We sometimes get very, very disheartened. But what is quite positive is that the community, I mean, as is from the Goa we have seen, this is from Kolkata, that how the young people and the common people, they are coming forward and they are not very many in numbers. Goa is really, it has united a lot of people, but all over the India, people are coming and they're understanding what is the, and especially fortunate is the young people who are coming. Also, on the other hand, we can see with the heritage in the context of UN's Sustainable Development Goal, as it is seeing heritage as a driver, an enabler of development. It is not anti-development. That is what is generally being perceived by outside the domain of the profession of conservation. And also in the context of climate change, it has been established now all over the world that heritage is a source of resilience. The strategic areas that ICOMOS International seeks to focus on, we have a lot to learn from that, and it can really becoming a good learning area. So we also see that or when we talk about the sustainable development goal, the demolition and rebuilding comes at an enormous energy cost. Towards the net zero emission goal within the sustainable goal, conservation of built heritage need to be recast in the context of sustainable development. This is a possible avenue. This is an alternative which many are not able to see in the name of the short-term development. But this requires significant capacity building of the structural assessment, rehabilitation industry in the country. So as a developing country, can we still begin that the move from purely a new infrastructure-centric economy to one where rehabilitation, reuse become a significant proportion? So what are the necessary education and profession-related changes that we must bring in? So this roundtable call seeks to ask critical questions and discover possible paths to making conservation as a critical determinant in development projects, or what some say as a heritage-led development. So our concern today, and the main address or the theme what we'd like to talk about, is that how should ICOMOS India rise up to this existential challenge? And we also see and we hopefully that the outcome of the roundtable will be developed into a format of written document, which will be published and which will give us, the ICOMOS India, something to give us the background or something to look forward to, and which ties up all our activities and hold on to it and gives a structure for our forward activities, next activities. Now we have three very important panelists who actually don't need any introduction. They are very well known, who have been working in education practice and the different fields of the conservation. We are very fortunate to have with them. I will just give a very quick introduction to them. Dr. Bennykuriakos, he started his career in 1984 and received the basic lessons in architecture under Laurie Baker. Under Charles Wallace Truss, he went to York and studied there as a conservation. He's a doctorate from Indian Institute of Technology in Madras. Known more for his work on the design of public buildings and transplantation of buildings in Kerala section of the Kraut village, Dakshin Kshetra is one of his very earlier work. And his major architecture, especially the moment, is the Mujiris Heritage Projects, which is over a large area, and he is really working with the community. And there are several other projects and the resource and the vernacular architecture. He has authored the book Conserving Timber Structures in India, and he's one of the editors of the book Guidelines for Preparation of Heritage Management Plan. He has offered his services as a consultant to UNDP, UNESCO, various state governments, and other organizations. Welcome, Dr. Bennykuriakos. We also have Neelkanth, Acharya, again, a very well-known academician and a practicing architect for nearly 40 years. He taught for 26 years at CEPT University, Ahmedabad, from where he retired as the Dean of Faculty of Architecture in the year 2013. Subsequently, an adjunct faculty at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design, Technology, Bangalore. He currently holds the UNESCO Chair in Culture, Habitat and Sustainable Development at Srishti. He participated extensively in conferences in the field of architecture and human habitat. Over the last few years, he has coordinated the Gandhi Heritage Study Documentation Project. His architectural practices focus on culturally and environmentally appropriate design and has emphasized innovative application of local skill and materials. Welcome, Professor Neelkanth. We have Professor Parul Zaveri, and who is a practitioner and also involved with education and academics. She, along with Nimish Patel, he established Abhikram in 1979 in a pursuit of responsible architecture, focusing on conservation of our sustainable cultural heritage-based architecture, historic buildings, adaptive reuse, and energy conservation through passive human comfort system, and on re-establishing the relevance of use of material, technologies, processes, crafts, and craftsperson in contemporary context. Pathbreaking works of Asia's largest passive cooled buildings, the Torrent, there are some of their research projects and the academic professional projects, the research center Ahmedabad, conservation, renovation, refurbishing of Udaipur Palace Complex, and Anokhi Haveli in Amber. Evolving policies of conservation for Udaipur, Ahmed, Jaipur, and Gujarat, also working with the government, is another field where they have extensively worked. She headed the conservation team of Intact Jaipur chapter in the Rajasthan Urban Infrastructure Development Project, the very first large-scale conservation work taken by Government of India. Welcome, Professor, Madam Parul Zaveri. Welcome, all three of you. We are very fortunate to have all three of you with us. We are really looking forward. So now to give a structure, we'll have a first round with, I will, as a moderator, will raise an issue where each one of you will have around 7-8 minutes time to deliver on. And then we will go to the second round with another issue to all three of you. And in the third round, probably we will have questions, specific question to each one of you. But what we are really looking forward to have a discussion amongst yourself and also a lot of questions from the audience. We hopefully will be able to manage that within our limited time. So welcome all of you. So this is the first round where we have, the question is that ours is a first growing economy that needs infrastructure development and renewal to keep up with the growing aspiration of young population. In this context, how do we define the value and the relevance of conservation-led regenerative and sustainable development? Because people often do outside our profession, the small group, people often do come that the conservation is for the old monumental structure and we have to modernize, so there is no place for conservation, we have to develop. So how do we look into that, towards that, from your experience of working? So I will first start with Parul Zaveri. Madam, I will stop sharing my screen here.
No, please continue sharing your screen. That's good. That helps.
I don't have anything more questions here. Anyway, okay.
Yeah. Can you please repeat the question? Yeah, again. Please, yeah.
Yeah, I will say. Ours is a first growing economy that needs infrastructure development and renewal to keep up with the growing aspiration of the young population. In this context, how do we define the value and the relevance of conservation-led regenerative and sustainable development? We have to do the infrastructure, but how do we do that in our context?
See, we need everyone's support in this. We have to take people from all walks of life with us to support us. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. Very much.
To support our cause, and for that we have to develop an understanding. We have to, as ICOMOS people, as people involved in conservation, we have to make the efforts of educating all of them about our heritage. See, anything, what will you preserve? When you have something, if you value it, you will preserve it. If you don't have any value, if you don't have any attachment with it, there is no reason for you to keep it. And it should also have some meaning in your life. if we can attack this problem and create an awareness, starting from even playgroup students, there are schools who take these people to such heritage places, make them understand the relationship between nature and then themselves as well as the buildings. So somewhere we have to start from there and attack every professional from different professions. And who are the key players in this? Architects, engineers. I'm talking about engineers from all fields. Then you have the business management people. So you have to attack all the IIMs and IITs and the IPS, IFS and IIA training centers, because they are the ones who will be making decisions. Basically, whoever is going to make a decision and how you train them from grassroots level. At grassroots level, even in villages. If we can do this at all scale and make them understand the relationship between the natural heritage and man-made heritage, and that for our survival, we need to conserve our natural heritage. And not only our survival, like for me, Nimish is gone. I don't know how many more years I have, but our age, it's a different story. For them, they have a whole life ahead of them. And COVID has exposed that part, that when you don't respect nature, what happens to you? And the minute you stop your consumerism attitude, whether it's of using electricity, air conditioners, etc., cars, vehicles, and then the nature comes back to life. And the major lesson from this is that nature will survive. It is us who will go. Nature has always revived itself. It's these species that go and vanish. So if all these importance and how all our heritage structures, our tangible and intangible heritage that we have has evolved with all this over thousands of years. And it has always gone through change, but that change is gradual. And it is a continuity, that there is always a continuity that is maintained. One is not saying that you don't use steel. You use it, but you use it in the right proportion. One is not saying you don't use glass, but use it in right proportion, using your brain, be sensitive to it. If people know, the children know, the school children know, the college students know, then you can expect this to come, because then ultimately they will also become manufacturers, they will become developers, they will take up different professions. Then they will look at it from that side. I mean, that is the take that we have. And like today, people have realized our intangible or tangible, the importance of yoga, importance of sunlight, importance of natural food that you need to eat, etc. All our traditional recipes and the locally grown, that awareness is increasing. So we can, mold people. And that's the only way I think we will find less resistance, or awareness will grow, and they will think about 10 times before taking such decisions.
Thank you. I think you have given a lot of emphasis on the training and the awareness at all levels, especially the children, which is very important, and all around making them, and how that it will change, but how to maintain the continuity and the relevance. Thank you. We'll come back to you again, probably some of your experience from your practice. We can mention. I will now go to Dr. Kuriakose. Bennykuriakos is extensively work in Kerala for the tourism-related projects and other. So how really you have the same question, that the infrastructure development and renewal, how in that pressing modernization, how in this context you define the value and relevance of conservation-led regenerative and sustainable development. Benny.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Yeah. I will try to talk from my experience, which is more on the practice side. And I've been working on this field for more than 3 decades. So I'll just try to say one of the things which I hear in many meetings is that we don't have a legislation. But I think that is not a critical question. Even in those places where the legislation is in place, things have not happened in a proper manner because our legislation is always negative and we normally do not get the support of the community or the people. So I don't think legislation is a major issue. The other second point that you hear is that there are no funds available. But I think most of the governments have a lot of funds. They might not have funds available for conservation or heritage because it's not a priority for them. But gone are the days, at least for the last 10, 15 years, every government has enough money. They don't know how to spend the money in the proper manner. Or, I mean, now the amounts that you hear is to have a rail or a highway, the amount of money spent runs into lakhs of crores. The amount is, so many lakhs of crores are being spent. Sanghamitra has expressed that participation is important. It's very, very important. People are important. And I think the feelings, the needs, the requirements of the people must get the greatest priority. In many of our projects, we might not have given the priority to the people. Everything, heritage is for the people. Development is for the people. What I say might look like a cliche, but no conservation proposal can be the leading thing unless the community or the people are in the front. Now, Sanghamitra also talked about cases where there are opposition, people raise questions, protest march, all those things. But when we raise a objection or any of these things, always the conservation community or the professionals should be able to give an alternate proposal. That what is being done is not the right kind of development. We should look at an alternate proposal which is in tune with the conservation and protection of heritage. And we should be talking with figures, or we should be able to convert certain things into figures and try to put into that. And what we should be doing, it's a repeated cliche, heritage is seen as a tool for development. Definitely, we have to take that into the heart. The second point that we should be doing in our practice is that we need to play with a long-term vision. Many of the projects we'll be able to attack that long-term benefits are very, very important. We should not be looking at short-term benefits. The way we present a proposal or protest against a proposal should be based on the long-term vision. And it's not the built heritage alone which is important. The natural heritage is also equally important. The intangible heritage is also very, very important. And we had to, in our proposal, although we have been trained to look at built heritage, we should be, in our master plan or the proposal, we should bring all these elements very, very consciously should be brought into this. And in the note also, I'm not very keen on, I'm not saying the objectives are wrong, but sustainable development goals, which we have the present sustainable development goals, we say it should be ready by the 2030. See, in 1987 was the International Year for Homeless People. We never achieved anything with that campaign by United Nations. In fact, since 1987, the number of homeless people have increased in spite of the so-called development and all those things. In 2000, we had the Millennium Goals. If we look at the Millennium Goals, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we have added a little bit more things to the Millennium Goals and coined the new term. And 2030 will come with another kind of context. You have to look at the Indian situation. You have to look at the local context. Going local with the overall framework is very, very important. Climate change is very important. It's around the corner. We can't no longer rub it as something which will not be happening. 30 years from now, Bombay is going to be different. Chennai is going to be different. Calcutta is going to be different. Kochi is going to be different. Most of the areas where huge amounts of funds are being spent are all areas which will be underwater in the next 30 years or 50 years. Why are we doing it? Why are we not taking the opinions of the professionals into account? And I also think that the sustainability is important, and it's very well studied. A lot of studies have come out that conserving a building is the greenest thing which you can do, because you are recycling the whole building. Why are we not putting across our argument in that ground? Putting up a new building will help or will hasten the process of global warming. And definitely this thing of conserving the buildings, converting it for an adaptive use, and that is very, very important. And what should be done? Unfortunately, I was not able to listen to all the presentations, but one thing which is very important is capacity building and training, which has already been raised in various forums. I think the duty of the senior professionals is to handhold the youngsters and convert them into, mentor them, train them into proper professionals. And I think the senior professionals in this ICOMOS or in various forums should take the responsibility of, I won't say training, I will say mentoring the youngsters who have a lot of ideas. We just saw it in the presentation which was just presented to us. And that is what is very, very important for the future of ICOMOS India and India as well as a whole. I think conservation should become a mainstream part of the profession, part of the mainstream profession.
Thank you, Benny. You have talked about long-term benefit and inclusion of master conservation as a part of the master plan and participation. And I think, and also alternative, that how to show the alternatives, that's a very important part. And you have stress, which is very important, is the capacity building and training. So with that, I'm going to Professor Chhaya, who has been a very well-known teacher for many, and been with CEPT for many years and also in the profession. So Professor Chhaya, what's your take in this? That how do you define the value and relevance of conservation-led regenerative and sustainable development, especially in the context of India, when people are going for, government is going for infrastructure development, fast change, and others?
Yeah, I think Parul and Benny have brought up very important points. I will be a little rude, if I might, because they've been very polite in how they've put it across. I think an organization like ICOMOS or people like us cannot simply skim the surface of what needs to be done. If a ship is sinking because it has a hole in the hull, then you can't sit around with spoons and try to throw the water out. Even if we are 1,000 people throwing the water out with spoons, the better thing might be to shut the hole. And I think the major issue here is the idea of development. that in the last 200 or maybe 100 years, the notion has been put across that you are deprived and you need to be developed by those who took away everything that the world had. They took that away and they told the others that you are deprived. Now we'll give you development. For that, you got to have a fast growing economy, which meant that money was the only basis for value, which we have swallowed and we are now following completely. Second, we said it is only technical infrastructure, irrespective of what it does to you. That is important, not what people know, understand, work with, and practice. Not that. It is machines or it is things which will get you somewhere. That's the second myth. I'm using only the terms from your question, by the way. And then there is aspirational youth. And who have these youth have been brainwashed by the market and the people in power to want more and more and more. And unless we break through this, and therefore the work of education begins at all levels. No age bar is there, not just undergraduate education, but at all levels. But it is also something which has to be very clear-headed and has to be razor sharp in looking at issues. It has to be something which doesn't take a propagandist idea of what is my heritage. My heritage is not that 1,000 years ago I was great. My heritage is yesterday I was able to save so many things. I was able to conduct agriculture in a way in which it would work fine. So my heritage is really something which is concerned with all kinds of practices. And the more we connect heritage and conservation to everyday life, that is, not keep it exotic for those who are rich to say, oh yes, we must save this, we must save that. But even a poor person realizes that this is something of great value. We can't do away with it. That is where I think the whole concentration of education has to be. How to create minds which will completely question everything, not accept something just because it is tradition, nor accept because it is said by some development mind or some propagandist of the market. Has to be something which is questioned through and through. And so I think we should create, Benny was saying, mentor people, but I think we really have to create an environment in which we are all part of our everyday society, just outside on my street, and talking to my vegetable seller about why it is good to keep the leaves for further use somewhere else. I mean, there are all kinds of little things like that. And it's the little things which would build up. So I think ICOMOS has to create school textbooks. It has to create public newspaper campaigns, and in local languages, of course, dealing with everyday life of people and showing what is valuable in practices that we already have achieved. So I think that's where I would put my money on.
Thank you, Professor Chhaya. I would like to share one point here, like that a lot of social media are coming where I know in Kolkata that they lament every day that the buildings are being demolished. But when you talk to some people like developers or even the people who are dealing with the materials and other things, they said, what's the use of keeping that and where is the money? So if you demolish that, how to maintain that? because the people can't maintain that, so you demolished another thing. So there is a conflicting thing about development. Another, I think it's but you have really shown us some of the way, like textbooks where ICOMOS can play a role. We'll come back to you again with this education with a more specific question. Thank you. We will go to the second round where some of the issues have come out. We have already seen that the major developmental projects in India today, I mean, that's in continuation of what I was saying, they are identifying mainly the declining inner cities. Benares is one, but it's happening everywhere. So declining inner cities they're taking the vibrant cultural landscapes as prime targets for rehabilitation. But whatever we are seeing that in the name of rehabilitation, what is happening that these are becoming very lopsided. Heritage is being used or exploited as a mechanism for modernization, destruction, and irreversible change. So these targets, which is happening especially in the inner cities and other, in the name of development, and when many of the architects outside the conservation, they're quite happy with that because they see conservation as a sort of barrier, obstruction to their practice. And so what does this signal for the profession and its future? And I agree that you have in your address or the first deliberation have pointed towards this in many ways, but you have any specific thing to address for that how for the profession in future, how to merge that apart from the points which you have mentioned. So Professor Chhaya, I'm coming back to you because in continuation, if you can give some points.
Yeah, wonderful. So first of all, I think everybody sees conservation as regressive traditionalism, something that takes away what you have achieved and will give you in return a half-baked old thing. How did that happen? If we are able to project conservation as creative rebirth, only then we will be able to shape education in a particular way. And it will then become mainstream. It can only become mainstream if we think of conservation as creative rebirth of some practices which were very, very good. In the face of climate change, we can see many practices of the use of materials, of recycling, of agriculture, all those practices. There are many which were very, very good. So first of all, I think we have to project how some of the known practices, the older practices, which are known to, let us say, the tribals, for example, which are known to people who are artisans, people who deal with everyday materials, how are those practices so important for society to be on a harmonious level? So I think that is one. But at the same time, we will have to say there are certain practices which are very destructive. For example, it may be caste, it may be many other social forms which are unjust, which keep out. So it has to be an inclusive model of understanding conservation, but it also has to be a critical model. So the conservation class should not only be somewhere it shouldn't be a class. It's actually the entire curriculum, which has to say, listen, we'll look at what we have and we will critically look at it and not try to be romantic about it. And when that happens, then an architecture program can create architects who are able to accept old things should be kept or renovated or rebirth. This is how I would look at education. One could go on, but I won't take much more time.
Thank you, Professor Chhaya, that as you mentioned, the tribal people and other, I think in a way the intangible heritage, which a lot of NGOs are working towards that. I know banglanatok.com in Bengal, and I think all over they are working with, and it is also becoming a tourist attraction. There is a catch there, but it shouldn't be. It should be more widespread and an integral part. So can I, with working with that, can I request Parul Zaveri to take that question? What is?
See, everything, if you want to preserve the heritage, it has to make economic sense to a person. Whether it's a person on the street or a person sitting on the top. This is something, the tribal heritage will be preserved if they can earn out of that. You know, that they don't have to go with a begging bowl, and they have to realize that what they have is valuable to the world and to people, and that they can definitely make money out of it. Things are changing, things are happening at grassroots level, because I do farming, I do organic farming. And now we have, for the first time, a group in Central Gujarat group of organic farmers. It has become a huge body. I know that 30% of them are not genuinely practicing organic farming, but they are coming, they are listening. You can get now organic vegetables and grains, and people are buying them all over. They're looking for it. So the change has to start at lower level. You know, it is just sprouting. And if professionals like us, and like, you know, Chhaya said very rightly that how we have to go about it, and so did Benny. Another thing is that the cities, to me, and such large projects are a firefighting case. They're gone cases. So let's concentrate on places that we can preserve. Let's concentrate on the minds of people. I mean, you know, create that in smaller towns, villages, smaller cities, and make them aware. Like today, Rajasthan, a lot is happening there. Even an IS officer will think twice. It's also our bylaws. It's also our intervention that we teach. You know, that you have to do intervention in the historic city, and then you come up with glass buildings. So that education, type of education that we have in the schools have to also change. But how can professors and teachers change it when they themselves don't know? So we also have to work at that level where COA has its training center for the faculty members. And we have to have more such training centers and maybe panel discussions or training programs for the faculties in each city and wherever there are these schools. That will help us to change things. It's yes, and GDP is one of the worst culprit. It's the biggest culprit. And unless we get out of that GDP, and like what Chhaya said, it was President Truman who started with this development. Yeah. Because US was already, they realized that they are the leaders now after winning the World War II. So how do we still remain the leaders in the world? So economy and development were the two things that were emphasized by them. And we have to make people understand also, none of the architects would have, I mean, it may be a controversial book, but it's something that it opens your mind. And Shashi Tharoor's book of Inglorious Empire, that will also make us realize what has happened and how we have lost our heritage.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I think You're done? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
There's a lot more, it'll come up.
Yeah, I think, yes. Vinny, would you like to, I have a specific question for you, which has come from the audience also, but would you like to first react on these, or should I ask you a specific question?
Let me just try to put my thoughts. And I agree with Professor Chhaya on the notion of development. The way we have understood development is not the right way. Conservation and development must go together.
Absolutely.
We are not blind against development, because you see all this Goa experience or some of the small experiences I had in Kerala, I mean, suddenly we are branded as anti-development. See, we are not blind against development, but we are only against blind development. It's an old slogan, 100-year-old slogan. What we have to put across as a profession, see, conservation is the only way for the future. It's the only way. I'm not talking about conservation. I'm talking about architecture and everything.
Yeah.
What we have to understand, whatever the most greenest, I mean, the building or the platinum rated building they use, still it makes an impact on the environment. The greenest building is one which is already existing, which had made its impact on the environment. Just the fact that pulling down one more building which is existing is adding to the global warming, adding to the climate changes.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we conserve our historic cities. And that is smart growth, not smart cities the way people think. I mean, there are loopholes or the major drawbacks in the way project, and we have to project that conservation is the way. That's why I said heritage is tool for development, conservation is a tool for development. The only way to achieve without affecting global warming or without adding to the climatic changes, drastic climatic changes, the only way is to look at conservation of the built heritage and natural heritage. We ourselves as a profession, we do not present it to the public or the policymakers like us. If we don't do it, we don't present it like us, who will present? And 1960s suburbanism, because since your question has dealt with the inner cities, so 1916 suburbanism came in US, and the entire thing was, I mean, a lot of satellite towns or outside, people had the automobiles, all these things happened. And the inner cities were neglected. And it's only in the late 1970s and 80s and 90s, we have started looking at inner cities and conserving inner cities. Why are we making the same mistake which the West has committed? Why are we not willing to learn from the mistakes? See, as I said, I mean, earlier, our generation is the older generation. It is very, very important for the younger emerging professionals group to look at these issues. And you have to fight these issues, because, I mean, we might not sit around to see these damages which are happening to our cities and heritage, but you are definitely going to be there, very much a part of this.
Thank you, Vinny. I think you have addressed some of the issues. I will continue with this because there is a specific question for you. So I'm combining two questions. So the question with you is that, are the Sustainable Development Goals realistic? This is one question. I would also like to ask you, I mean, deliberate on, because you have worked with Mujiris. I myself have seen that how you have worked with the community and the tourism and the local people in the small towns and the region. So, this has been realized that a considerable investment is happening for profitable and politically motivated, this may sound a little bit drastic, to cultivate cultural tourist destination, while neglecting a more balanced policy of long-term conservation of entire range of heritage resources, while it is becoming more in culture. It's not particularly in case of specific, I think is general. So, Benny, if only some heritage resources prove to be useful for this kind of heritage development where investment is happening, what shall be done for the rest to have an holistic development, which is also a sustainable development goal? So their focus is not always the community. Probably it's only built heritage. Probably it's just Vishwanath corridor dam, it's only some have been preserved, but a lot of thing has been demolished. So we can't say it's a holistic. So, I mean, please.
Yeah, I will try to, there were two questions. One is to what extent sustainable development goals are, how will we achieve? I'll just take one issue. When I passed out in 1984, there were 25 million families without a house. Families, not people. And 2015 or something, it was 55 million families. Definitely now the figure will be around 60 million families in India. In spite of so many engineers and architects passing out, we are becoming a highly developed country and digital India and all those things. Now, one of the important things I've realized, or many people, it's not me, that every issue is not a technical issue. It has social dimensions, it has cultural dimensions, it has political dimensions, it has psychological dimensions and economic dimensions. That's the first thing any professional, not only architectural professional, they should learn that thing, because we still try to solve these issues as technical issues. They don't understand many of the dynamics or how it happens in the thing. This is one of the major issues facing any other developmental issues. So if you want to solve any of these issues, just take for housing. As I said, I don't want to deal with the other. Suppose tomorrow, everybody says it's a question of financial resources. Suppose one house will cost 3 lakhs rupees or 4 lakhs rupees. Suppose today we have resources to build these 60 million houses. We have the money for it. Is the industry, is the profession equipped to carry out such a task? We don't have resources. We don't have enough cement. We don't have enough steel. We don't have enough river sand. If we want to think that we will use one of these modern gypsum materials or fly ash or anything, even then we don't have enough materials to build this 60. So when you put across, so all these, I'm not blaming anything. It becomes, all these people say, no, it will be solved by 2024, 2030. Of course, it adds a value. People start thinking about this. When I passed out 30 years ago, homelessness or houselessness was not an issue. At least people talk about it now. So it's very, very important. We don't look at the basic things, but we put it as political slogans. In 1960s and 70s, when I was a young child, roti, kapda or makan. Roti, kapda, we could solve it to a great extent because it's only a question of production. But distribution, there would have been inequalities or imbalances, but housing, it is also a question of, it is not easy to produce 60 million houses. So as youngsters, Sharanya, you just look at how we can solve these issues. It needs broad brainstorming and these things. Now, coming back to the Musuris, I'll just try to answer it shortly. We have not put across it as a cultural tourism. Our objective is not cultural tourism. I've mentioned it in all my documents and put it in, I've gone in front of the tourism secretary and tourism minister, everybody, and said that this is not a tourism project. Primarily, conservation of heritage, including built heritage and intangible heritage and natural heritage, is the primary objective. Now, what is the second objective? Second objective is to make people aware. Use these resources for non-formal education of the school children. We have millions of school children. Let them learn from these heritage and resources. Let them use these heritage buildings as textbooks, which we can learn. And let it be used as non-formal. As I said, that is the second objective. That will economically justify. By any project you take cost-benefit analysis, the government asks for. This will justify, because government is spending 10,000s of crores or thousands of crores for education. Let this be an education. Let us produce a generation which is aware about heritage and have the right notion about development. So that was my second argument. My third argument is that this is a project for development, but development in a different way. Putting multi-storied structures need not be development. There could be an alternate method of development, alternate ways of development. And that is what we have to bring in. The fourth or fifth objective will be the cultural tourism. The tourists can come and enjoy these things. But the funding is coming from the tourism department, because tourism department has funds. Culture department has 25 people, might be in the whole cultural department of the state government of Kerala, 25 people. But tourism department will have 10 times or 20 times or 50 times the budget of the culture department, because this is the value we give to culture. We see the culture as an important thing because we are involved in culture. For a normal, if an IAS officer is posted as secretary culture, I mean, of course, the film industry also comes under the culture. But otherwise, I mean, it's seen as not a very, I mean, it's like a punishment post. If he's posted as a commissioner of museums and archives and culture, I've seen IAS officers telling me that I've rubbed shoulders with the minister and I am posted as the commissioner for museums and archives and culture. So this is the situation. Let us try to bring this into the mainstream. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. This is quite a good input into that and a direction. I'd like to, I mean, in continuation to this, Professor Chhaya, you did mention about the education. But you know that as I think it's coming out that Indian culture is based on a foundation that is as an implicit interaction between the tangible and intangible. And it's a continuous process, which has been mentioned by all of you. But in this ever-changing built environment, what is perhaps urgently required is to see also the undergraduate course. I mean, all of you have talked about that, a broad-based course and other. So what specifically should be, you have mentioned that, but what specifically should be done in the undergraduate? Because there the Council of Architecture also comes into, because the education is their purview. So what ICOMOS can also play a role in suggesting or other things to change the architectural undergraduate course so that equip the future practitioners with sensitivity and tools for intervening in historic context, because it's not always the old buildings, not always the leaded or listed or graded building. There are other buildings in the. So how to do that contextual design, how to do that, inculcate a sense of history or sensitivity, more to say, in the undergraduate's heritage education overall.
Yes, I think first of all, the entire basis of undergraduate education looks upon the isolated object and the aesthetic view of the isolated object, and also aesthetic not in all the senses, but the visual only. This is what is taught in the first year in the basic design course and continues to be the basis of the evaluation of works of students through the entire process. We have to change that, first of all. From the very first year, we should be working in what one might call existing environments, where you are not looking at something isolated, but you are looking at something which is within a cultural context, a place context, a language context, all these contexts, material context. And you are seeing all these dimensions, and the word aesthetic then is understood as achieving harmony with the context rather than imposing a so-called beautiful object onto it. You know, what Parul talked about as intervention. Yeah. So I think the whole course has to work in actual locations, actual cultural formations, so that all the time you are looking at your practice as an architect as being something which is very gently modifying some environment rather than breaking it up. And I think this is where all the courses, your courses on technology, will have to look at what are all the techniques which are available, not those which are so-called world-class new techniques, cutting-edge techniques, not that, but you can learn that also. But first of all, you must know what in your area, what does a carpenter do? What does so all that. So technologies could work with that. The courses in history must work with the multi-dimensional impact of very many aspects that Benny has just now pointed out in the formation of an environment. So in short, I think the movement away from a object-oriented, visual-dominated architectural education towards an architectural education which considers process of something coming into existence as modifying and re-establishing equilibrium. I think we have not, you know, you look at the words which are used in architectural schools, they're very violent words. You know, how is it that, you know, in 2021, you are building like this? This is often a question which is asked. Why does 2021, my body has remained the same? My mind has remained roughly the same. Why should it be a new type of building? The old building may do as well. And I might use that very, very well. That's what I do when I rent a new house. And how do I create a happy equilibrium amongst all these needs is something which is the genius of the poor person. And I think the whole education is dominated by the mindset of the rich person. That's my last point, that the mindset of the one who has less resources will be able to change education towards something which is more wholesome, not only holistic, but wholesome. And I think we need that wholesomeness. For that, we have to appreciate the multiple forces that make an environment, and then we have to very gently participate in it. This is what I think should be the case.
That's a very, very important point. Chhaya, do you know that any institute in India where it has been tried in some way, or in education, or in the courses and other things? Yeah. Any idea?
For example, CEPT did it long time ago. TVB school in Delhi was based on this premise from the very first year they went into, and I'm sure there have been many teachers who did things in different places, in Mumbai, in Chennai, in the South, everywhere. There must have been schools which were approaching this subject somewhat differently. But I think it has to become a general understanding in the architectural profession as well, not just having industry-ready professionals. The industry-ready professional who is demanded by the industry. First of all, we are not an industry. We are part of a culture forming set of people. And we are not an industry which produces thousands of buildings or uses up materials or destroys spaces. We are people, and we think, and we have hearts. And with that, we go towards our work. And I think that is something which rarely can be made into a curricular requirement. It is something which, as Parul said, requires the reorientation of the entire profession's outlook, including in education.
Yeah, I think that should be the thing, and it's a long-term goal, and we have to see how from ICOMOS we can do that. I think this is very necessary. Though it's a very we should have to work, but it will take a long time. Hopefully, some major structural thing will happen. It's actually the change of mindset which is required an approach. Yes, Madam Zaveri. Yeah.
We had a school year called Shreyas from primary to SSC level. And there, every year, they took one region. Either it was a state or it was a country. And right from the play group to SSC, everyone studied that region. They talked, they wore such clothes, they ate that, they listened to that music, they were taught that music, the plays were enacted, etc. And at the end of the year, all this was presented to the public. And Ahmedabad people, everyone, not only just who's who, even the person on the street would want to go and attend those 3 days of festival, which showed all this. So something like that, then you're immersed in that culture, whether it's food, everything. And something like that is done occasionally with our architecture. And I wouldn't say just architecture, because even if we have architects who are sensitive and wanting to do the design and conserve and work towards conserving tangible and intangible heritage, the engineers don't know. Even the contractors that we know of, heritage contractors, they say that, madam, we have to train these engineers for at least 2 years with our craftsmen and with our senior engineers to make them understand what should be used, what is lime, what is this material, and how you work with it. At the same time, when you're working with heritage structures and our traditional ways of building, the total way is very different from the Western way of building that we have learned now. It is the traditional craftsman, he will ask you what you want. What is the finish that you want? He will ask you in the beginning. And for that, he will start preparing the material. Some materials may take 1 year to prepare, like Araish, the stucco plaster, etc. And they will do it by themselves. That kind of responsible behavior they have. And that also needs to be brought in. And we have to understand the way they work. They don't need many drawings also. You work with them with very few drawings. You may just have plans, section and one elevation, and then you just talk about elements and things that would come in. And they understand it exactly. All you have to say, acha, aapko detail kaisi chahiye? Okay, I just want this, something like this. Okay, why don't you give me? They participate in your design process. You make them, whether it's a carpenter, it's another craft person, or it's a mason. You make them participate in your design process, and then they work with their heart and mind and soul. And that's how you get the best buildings. That also culture needs to be brought in at all technical and other levels.
Yes, that's very interesting that your school experiment and other, that reminds me when I was visiting CEPT for a conference and we saw that the students are working and there was no teacher there. Only the craftsman, the mason was there and all the students are working with him. So the mason was teaching them actually how to put the things and other. We are so impressed with that. I think that's the way to learn, and even from the basic thing that's really, I think, it cannot be only for 1 or 2 schools. It has to be a part of the general thing. So I will continue with Madam Parul Zaveri, because you have worked a lot for Rajasthan governments and you have worked with the government's policies and the projects and other. So we have seen that the centrally planned development, not everywhere, but somewhere, it works against the cause of cultural heritage as a common inheritance. Rajasthan may be a pathfinder, they are doing quite well, but if we talk generally. So how can the heritage profession reflect on these and act so that it does not become an instrument of top-down efforts at the national scale? I mean, learning from your experience with Rajasthan, working with the government, what you would like to suggest that it should not become an instrument of top-down efforts?
See,
rather than more.
We started working and we were doing all pro bono work. For 10 to 15 years, it was a team of us, myself, Nimish, John Singh, who was the convener of INTAC, and Dharminder Kanwar, who was the secretary INTAC. We all were working as a team. No one was expecting except that Dharminder was paid. But we were giving our time. We would come on our own. We will give our time, stay with John and Faith and work and really create reports and show the government officers. You know, we piled up reports on their tables. And while Nimish and I were not there, John and Secretary Dharminder Kanwar would just go and eat up their heads. We were just pursuing them, educating them. We had lots of panel discussions. We had lots of conferences, which were self-funded. And that is how we educated them. And then, of course, the Jaipur Virasat Festival, which we started, and which encompassed everything, all the tangible and intangible heritage. And that's, and we also, Anokhi Haveli that was conserved, it was, we were supposed to actually, INTAC was supposed to give us the funds to get a Haveli and make it into a craft center where architects and engineers would be trained in traditional architecture, craftsmanship, etc., building technologies. We were allotted a building, and then one day we found when our team went there that it was given away to leprosy department. One arm of the government gave it to us and the other arm gave it to the leprosy department. So then we started again hunting for another Haveli, which Dharminder found. And of course, in red tapeism, they couldn't take the decision at INTAC Delhi level. And John Singh was an impatient man, so he just bought it. And we said, okay, you've invested your time, money, we will invest our time. And then we started looking for craftsmen. Traditional craftsmen were not easily available, but with Anokhi and their, arms were quite, their fingers were there in many villages because they were doing textile, traditional printing and embroidery, etc. So we found one craft person, one artisan. He came, he couldn't believe that really we wanted to conserve that dilapidated Haveli. And it was up to him to decide. So he brought 4 more. So we had 5. And then it took us, gradually the way he could put in the money, the way we could put in our time. And we involved the people of Amer. We said, what do you think it should be? What should we do? How should we build? So there was a participatory development of local people. Then the government people were brought in to show the results. And ultimately, we also had to become contractors in showing how to conserve and repair some parts of the Amer Palace. Because people were the contractors were using cement and then painting it red and terracotta color. So we went to meet the person in charge. And he said, well, will you do it? And Dharminder said, yes, we will become contractors. And Nimish, myself and John were looking at her. What are you saying? How can we become contractors? But we took up that challenge, showed how things can be done. And that's how gradually even Jaisalmer, the way the bylaws came up, you could see from our reports, a lot of sentences were picked up from there and then tweaked and put in the bylaws for Jaisalmer. So a lot of work was done for 15 years, and that's when we got the result.
Yes, so what you were saying is that the conservation architect has to come out of his professional hat and has to take on a community person enabler and working with that. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. As you rightly mentioned, it's a pro bono
work.
Yeah. So as you mentioned about the Jaisalmer Act, may I ask you, Madam Parul Zaveri, that do you think the contextual guidelines, this is one of the questions by the audience, that do you think contextual guidelines can be a method for defining development than general guidelines on conservation-oriented development legal framework?
Absolutely. We must have contextual, not only for heritage development, we should have that for the city. All they're talking about is only FSI and exploiting the FSI the way they can. We must show the benefits, how they are, put that this should be the ultimate outcome. It cannot be that this is the square feet that you will have, but in bylaws should talk about the outcomes that the building should give.
More of a demonstration that how it should be, rather not very textual. I think I've seen in some of the countries, they actually show by pictures that what is not desirable and other with the law.
We had done that for Amer. We had done sketches, developed bylaws, and we had done sketches how to place the building, how to do the building, what not to do and what to do.
Oh, that's a thing. So is it available in an open forum?
I'll just have to dig through all those pages.
No, I mean, that can be sort of, because I always say that outside. So I always say that the sketches, when the common people understand that should be the thing. This brings us to, when we are talking about the law and the legal aspects, a very important thing, people call it heritage economics. The fundraising can be an important tool for future conservation departments. And development is the fundraising, or how to do or how to address this challenging thing of heritage economics when it's come to the profit and gain. Of course, it needs a mind change. Who would like to address that off?
I can give an example.
Okay.
That what you see in Udaipur, it's the hotels are mushrooming. It's become the hub of tourism and weddings, etc. But it started with Arvind Singh Ji, the Maharana Arvind Singh Ji. He leased the land to Oberois across the lake, which was their land. And one of the things that when we were asked to design, we said that these are the guidelines that we have come up with in conservation guidelines for heritage development of Udaipur city, and we will not violate that. Arvind Singh Ji knew that, and that's how he introduced us to Mr. Oberoi. And Mr. Oberoi said, yes, I want to build a palace. But when he leased the land, his people, whoever had the guts, had come and used to come and tell him that, why are you creating competition? He said, you don't understand my vision. I am creating competition for myself, but look at what it will do to the economy of the city. And sitting on this seat, that is my responsibility to work for the people and create that economy enabler for the city. So we need to convince people at the top level. And it is after that the villas properties of Oberoi started happening. That was the first project that was to go on floor. And in which we have not violated anything that we had put as recommendations. So we worked with Mr. Oberoi, and of course we were able to revive lots of arts and crafts. And Arvind Singh Ji was also all the time working how to revive the cultural heritage, what it was to be, what were the functions carried out by the palace, what were the traditional festivals that were done, etc. And to create funds, because they did not have funds. The weddings had come in. So we had done almost like a fake wedding. in Jagmandir, and that was filmed and that was marketed. It was not really fake, but it was someone, an architect from Oberoi's who wanted to get married. So we were all the Janayas. Arvind Singh ji was having a dadi and he became the Pandit. And that was a foreigner. So that's how the whole thing started about Udaipur. And this is something that you have to catch the right person in that area, in that village, in that city, and work with it.
With an administration, yes, Professor, yes.
Yeah, I think Parul has talked about one end of the spectrum, but there is another end to the spectrum.
Sure.
And that is, it is normally thought that doing work of a certain kind will cost more. And therefore, then a question of heritage economics and all that is brought in. Why has this happened? Because we have allowed the atrophy of skill. We have allowed that, and we have agreed to pay more for certain kinds of things. You know, like I will pay for a laptop much more than what I will pay for a house, maybe, you know, a small house. And that kind of imbalance is there. How do we bring about a new balance? And that means that we have to have many people who can do good work. And Hunar Shala, for example, has started something called the Karigar Shala, where we pick up young people from the villages who have given up schooling and make them into skilled carpenters, skilled masons, train them, and then incubate them to form companies which can compete with the most competitive contracting firms. And they have managed to get projects and done them at a lower cost and within time limit. So I think the whole thing is that we have to look at education at many levels. And we have to create skills of all kinds. And with that, then the idea that heritage or conservation has to be more expensive may be less prominent, I think. It may be possible to have ordinary economics, not a special heritage economics.
Uday Vilas, let me tell you, was cheaper than a modern building at that point in time that was being constructed. And so was restoration of Anokhi Haveli, much cheaper than any new building being constructed in Jaipur city.
Thank you. Benny? Yes, Benny. Benny, please unmute yourself. Benny?
Yeah. I will bring 2 points. One is that my experience says that if the foundation, walls, and roof is more or less in good condition, then it is economical to conserve a building. Take it, this is the thumb rule I take. Roof, more or less in good condition. It is cheaper, it is economical. Forget about the benefits of recycling a building and all the pure economics I'm talking about. This is one aspect. I normally quote another example. In Fort Cochin, in Kerala, when the legislation came, there were so many people who owned this small plots of land, not very small. They had a heritage house. They thought the legislation is going to come. They'll never be able to build or make modifications to it. And tourism is booming in the area. They demolished the 5-bedroom house and constructed a 20-room hotel. There are a lot of people who have done it like that because they thought now they will catch on the tourists and all those things. Now, when you look back, this 5-room heritage hotel or the boutique hotel sells a room for 15,000 rupees or 20,000 rupees a night. The other 15-room sells the room for 2,500 rupees a night. So clearly economic shows that heritage and conservation will pay for the, again, you have to take the long-term benefits into account. Do not look at short-term benefits, which is the profit motive. I mean, I'm not saying, every individual has the right to make money or I mean, the right to property, right to do whatever he wants. But when it comes to heritage and conservation, I think the society, so in the interest of the society or the community becomes more important. That we as a group should be willing to accept it, which is why the conservation efforts in many of the foreign countries have become more successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny. I think this also, in a way, as Professor Chhaya said, the perception of aesthetics, that even in the smaller towns and other, they try to imitate the bigger cities, and they really don't know how much that beauty they have, and the overall comfort and other things, especially at the smaller towns and others. Benny, I will, to all of you, I will ask a question which has come out from Mr. Naveen Piplani. But before that, I will go, and Benny, I specifically you, but others also can, that it's the next version of the national, because when we are talking about the legal aspects, the next version of the National Building Code possibly should have a section dealing with conservation of built heritage to begin with. The 2016 version of National Building Code addresses new domains such as construction project management and sustainability. ICOMOS India should possibly write to BIS to initiate this. How do you react to that? Benny, or any, yes, or anybody else? Benny, please.
See, there should not be too many people doing the same thing. One is that INTAC is already brought out a charter. They brought out a schedule of rates. They are also working on specifications. Similarly, Aga Khan Trust is also working on specifications and how this should be, guidelines for conservation. We have the Professor Bernard Fielden's guidelines for conservation, which is already published by this thing. We need more. The experience of the senior professionals should be shared with the youngsters. So there should be more forums or more things by which this experience. We, as far as conservation is concerned, we are a very young, country, or we are still an infant, or we are still children. We have to become, this expertise will become the country's expertise, is what is very, very important. And that is the role which ICOMOS India has to play. Professor Chhaya has a lot of experience. Professor Zaveri has a lot of experience from Rajasthan, working with the craftsmen, working with all these kinds of stones. I have a different kind of experience, and that should be pulled together, and that should become the knowledge of the entire conservation profession in India. That is missing at the moment. And unless that is why I said in the beginning that we need to mentor the younger professionals. They have good intentions, but they lack the proper guidelines.
Yes, so what you're talking about is the knowledge system and how to put that. But the same question I'm putting to both Madam Zaveri and Professor Neelkanth, that so do you think that the National Building Code should have a section dealing with the conservation? A very specific question. Benny has said it, but Professor Chhaya?
Yeah, I see nothing wrong in it being part of the National Building Code. And that should be followed. And I don't think that there is much scope for discussion in your question. It should, a National Building Code should have conservation as its main basis, and then the other things about how to destroy and build new. So really speaking, I would go so far as to say that it should be the foundation. And then new will only come after that, where you cannot do with that. So, but yes, it should be part of the code.
Yes, but at the same time, we have a very different type of materials and all over the India. So we have to check that. Yes, Madam. You're mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Nimish and I have been part of the NBC code group, and Nimish fought a lot to get lime into it. And now lime is part of NBC code, which was, I'm sure, removed by the Britishers because they wanted to sell their cement. So that is there. And also on sustainable buildings, also there are things that have been introduced on passive cooling as well. And I'm sure they're open. We just need to be there, be active, and get all that introduced in.
Yes, I also have seen that they have some booklets talking to different limes and other, which proved very helpful to me when I was working for a restoration project.
One more thing is that lime, which forms the basis of most of our construction system, besides mud and laterite, etc. Now most of the lime mines for many years have been leased by cement companies, the best lime mines. So that's another hurdle, and that's why the lime cost has gone up. They take a material that can last for thousands of years and convert it into a material that can hardly last for 35, 40, 50 years when it starts losing its strength. And that also needs to be looked into.
Thank you. And it's good to know that you were a part of that and how you included lime and other in the building code. That's a very interesting point. I think we really have pearls of wisdom from each one of you to work on. And I think we're coming to the last question that has been raised by President ICOMOS India, Mr. Naveen Piplani. Should we be setting up, because we are looking for direction, should we be setting up an ICOMOS India Advisory Council for academic and practice of architecture? In order to take the discussion and recommendation forward, we will need a dedicated group. What is the view of all three of you, the panel? Should we be setting, should we should
not restrict to architecture. You will not get anywhere. You have to include the engineers. You have to include other people. You have to include, sorry, God.
No, it's okay. We can hear you.
Yeah. We have to include people from other fields to make our voice heard as part of the panel. Otherwise, things will not go ahead. And we have to understand their viewpoints also.
Sure. And Professor Chhaya?
Yeah, well, the profession of architecture is deeply entrenched in a certain view of what is architecture. And certainly, as a matter of humorous interlude, we should prepare a curriculum which looks at Benny's outlook, which says don't build anything new as the basis of architecture, and we should propose it to the Council of Architecture as an alternative curriculum. Not that I expect it to go very far, but we can certainly enjoy that exercise, and we should go ahead and do it, Naveen. I think we should go ahead and put mad ideas into circulation. Someday they might fruit. So I think we should go ahead and do that. But we should be mad enough. That is one thing that I think I would ask, that we should not remain within the confines of the profession as it is defined under the dispensation of monopolizing a field of knowledge and making it instead a field of knowledge which is belonging to all and which is really something which is embedded in society rather than certified by somebody who says, now you are a professional. And I think that whole rigmarole has to be questioned somewhere. Then we'll get somewhere. Yeah, what Parul is saying is the same thing in different words. And I'm saying the same thing, that overall, the manner in which the profession is defined is itself problematic. And I think that is something for which, as architects, we have a right to say, and we have a right to propose other models. I think we should do that. Why not? as citizens even, not only just architects, because I think Parul will then say that you have not included engineers. So as citizens, we have a right and a duty, I see.
Thank you. Benny?
See, I have not been in the teaching profession at all at any point of my career.
That doesn't matter. That doesn't
but
matter.
I go once in a while and teach. And I ask this question to them: are the teachers enjoy teaching? Most of them say they don't enjoy teaching. They might have enjoyed teaching 25 years ago. They say that things have changed, students have changed. How many students are keen on learning things?
Not true, not true, not true. I haven't seen any change in the students. They are as sharp and as challenging as before. And I think those teachers who are tired of teaching, they should leave. They should become, draftsmen in some offices and forget about being teachers. So there, I think we can't have that as the basis of our decisions.
But the fact is that there are so many colleges. We had, say, 50 colleges 25 years ago. Now we have might be more than 500 colleges. So everybody becomes a teacher. I mean, at least the majority of the teachers. And what with this, I mean, generally people have to understand that design architecture is very different from physics and chemistry. So it has to be taught in a particular way. It has to be discussed in a particular way. I agree with Professor Chhaya, who said the example of the hole in the boat. And now I always say that we need surgery and not medicines. Unless we realize this fact, I think we need some drastic steps to be taken if you want to make these. It's not just the reorientation might not be the only answer. We have to look at things from a completely different point of view. And that is not easy to happen. Also, so I always believe that, I mean, from people like Professor Chhaya and people like Zaveri, and I mean, you should start a finishing school, which should run for 2 months or 3 months, so that we can do a little bit of mentoring.
I heard that your office is something like that. And
now
Parul's office is like that. And my office is like that they come out of college and unlearn everything that they'd learned.
That's true.
But then, I mean, whatever we do is like few drops in the ocean.
Yes, of course.
Unless we make changes in the mainstream, I mean, as a whole, that is what is required.
Yeah.
Which means unlearning, deschooling, all these things are very, very important. And unfortunately, once the certificate and once they get the Council of Architecture registration, people think that they are equipped to do anything. But the quality of education has come down. I'm not talking about CEPT and schools like that. Many of the smaller schools with so many, where again, short-term gains make maximum profit. I mean, education has become a business. And now many of the colleges, because the Council of Architecture restriction, everybody is starting 4-year BDES course. Bachelor of Design courses are being started everywhere. So where is this going to lead to?
Also, one more thing that we have always felt is that we think that the design has to be executed exactly the way we design on our table. Actually, the design has to happen and develop on the site with the craftsman, with the user. You have to work with them. We work with the carpenters, we work with the artisans. Like I said, even the carpenter, we said, Acharya, this is something that we want. What do you think? For every design, even in architecture, we work with the craftspeople. And unless you involve them and the user, and they become the major focus people, that's why, all our users are very happy. We may have fights towards the end, but once they start staying in that place, they love it and they bring us other clients. We have till date not gone looking out for a project. And This is what we learned, because as students, when we were visiting all the high-profile architects' buildings, the users were full of complaint. And that's what taught us that it has to be user-centric. And then as we started working in Rajasthan, we realized that the artisans were better designers than us, because in the first place, they knew the material, they knew the culture, and they knew the climate. And they worked and designed accordingly. That's it.
Yes, so at all level, from the school level to the other level, and after coming out of the graduation, I think we need there are some efforts from the various things, Intact Heritage Academy and the different schools are trying to work, but it has to be more formalized probably to change the mindset. I think, thank you so much. I will now anybody else? Benny, you have to say something? Or okay, so I think I will now request Professor Arun Menon to sum up and to conclude.
Very good evening, and let me begin by. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm overwhelmed because I was taking notes, not because of the amount of pages I had to fill. I filled about 9 sides in this diary that I have in front of me. But I was so happy to listen to the dimensions that we don't normally get to listen to. And I think that has been the real value of the experience all of you have brought in. I think it will take time for me to assimilate this information, but there are key points that we will put together in a document. And I thought I'll quickly go through 10 points that have emerged. They're not in the right sequence. They need to be grouped together better, but are important points that we should really be reflecting on. So, number one, the need to target grassroots, bring in sensitivity to natural man-made heritage, see how we begin early to move away from this consumerist attitude, and therefore see how we begin early in school education to touch upon this aspect of valuing our heritage, because unless we value, we're not going to act on it. So that's tough, but I think in terms of environmental awareness, schools have been able to bring that change. Today, if my children don't want to celebrate Diwali by bursting crackers, it's because the school has impressed upon them that you're actually polluting the environment in the name of having fun. So the change is possible. And in heritage, we must take that line. The professional should be able to give an alternative. And that's very important, because if the professional is unable to come up with an alternative with heritage as a tool for development, borrowing from Benny's intervention, we fail as a provider of alternatives for the society to move forward. So that's the second point. Again, as professionals, we should be able to see the long-term benefits against the short-term benefits, but be able to articulate how the society stands to gain, how the community stands to gain from investing towards these long-term benefits. A paradigm shift is needed. This probably is the biggest challenge, because money is a basis for development today. GDP as what captures development, but that's probably a very difficult stance that we have to tackle. but a paradigm shift is definitely essential in that direction. Heritage, how do we as professionals and part of the community project it as, I use this phrase from Professor Chhaya, creative rebirth. And that's what we should be able to do by linking everyday materials, everyday methods, critical and inclusive. How do we represent heritage as something that is a continuity in this society? So that is another important aspect to mull over. And the way Benny put it, we must be convinced as professionals that conservation is the only way forward. It's not an alternative. It's the only way forward. And why is it so difficult for professionals to see that and leverage that? Because there is opportunity in leveraging that. So as professionals, we need to be convinced. We talked about smart growth as against smart cities, because the smart city projects are scary in certain areas. So how do we work with that? This is the only alternative. There isn't another alternative. Another fantastic idea that came about is how we can use heritage resources as books for the younger generation. You take children to these buildings, you take children to these sources of heritage. And that's one reason why we need to invest in keeping these resources alive, because that's what's going to mold our society and mold our community and the country. This entire discussion that we had on aesthetics and how the architecture education is so strong in reinforcing visual aesthetics, that pleasing to the eye is what we want. And aesthetics as achieving harmony with the context is not the actual meaning of aesthetics, is something that has become ingrained in most of us. That is another important paradigm shift that is essential. Architect Zaveri was talking about professionals needing to wear different hats, engagement, sometimes pro bono, but this engagement with the government, engagement with policy makers, decision makers, looking at the professional, looking at the conservation professional as the facilitator, using different projects to actually be able to demonstrate how change can be brought about. And then when we were talking about the issue of heritage economics, this phrase that I'm borrowing from Professor Chhaya, the atrophy of skill. It's the atrophy of skill that's actually made it that the cost associated with heritage projects is humongous, and that you cannot, I mean, unless you have the money, you cannot do heritage conservation, is the message that's loud and clear, unfortunately. Yes, so these are the key points that I've actually been able to mark out in my notes, and really need your support as we piece together the narrative that we've had coming out of the discussion today in a position paper of ICOMOS India, and the conclave being a platform for seminal thought in moving both profession, the practice and education forward, and what ICOMOS India can really do in that context. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Basu. Over to you.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. You have summed up very well. Am I audible?
Yeah.
I've summed up very well. I think we really look forward to the position paper, which will give us a thrust and a foundation for our future activities for the ICOMOS India. A lot of, it's really a wisdom from your vast experience which has come up. And I thank Professor Arun Menon, President and the ICOMOS, for giving me this opportunity to interact with you. And thank you so much, all of you, and also the audience to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.